Yeah, the microphone to the gentleman who is standing.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. That was very lucid and insightful presentation that you have just made. I have two questions. What is actually the policy direction with regard to this government when it comes to issue of new refineries? I'm not ignorant of the fact that there has been an attempt to revive the old ones with all the attendant technical hitches with no much result. And also, I'm not ignorant that you mentioned that Dangotes of this world are one or two companies that are interested in private investment in refinery. What is actually this government's policy with regards to issue of new refineries? And secondly, is this government subsidizing PMS? If yes, how much? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll take 3 questions, then we'll provide answers. The lady next to you there. Thank you.
I'm already standing. Yeah. Yes, my name is Iniro Wills.
Somebody's already.
We asked for the lady. Yeah, standing, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. I've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to roll them up. Now, the first question is more like a general comment, which is either I can see all the investment and the direction to move from oil to gas, but I don't know that I see an attempt to diversify the economy even from petroleum. That's the first issue. Now, the second issue is with respect to the fiscal policy that Dr. Okon talked about, and the fact that there's almost like a penalty for a higher cost of production. It almost looks like we're looking at a band-aid, because if we do not address the very fundamental issues, fundamental economic issues, how do the cost of production go down? If we still have militancy in the Niger Delta, if we still have people breaking into pipelines in the Niger Delta, if we still have multiplicity of different establishments and different parastatals, you know, and different fines and different, I mean, we have NIWA, we have NIMASA, we have NESHRA, we have overlapping of functions, we have fees that oil companies, indigenous and international oil companies have to pay. Now, this is a problem. We also have a high cost of funds. Now, the oil company, international oil companies are able to access funds because they've got parent companies. What about the indigenous companies? Cost of fund, 22%. So without these factors being addressed, how do we then penalize people with a higher cost of production? How do we really look at the things that contribute to the cost of production and not just say if you have a cost of production at $50 or $60 per barrel, then you don't make any profit? And also, in all of these bills, how are we looked at the multiplicity of functions? Because we've got a lot of in recent times, we see a lot of agitations, not just with the parastatals. We also see it with the local government. We also see it with state government encroaching into oil and gas territory and asking for all kinds of fines. And these all add to the cost of production and the cost of doing business, and even the transparency of what your cost is.
The gentleman who was speaking before I stopped him.
Yes.
The gentleman who was speaking before I stopped him.
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Iniro Wills. Naturally, I would have been speaking about communities and the environment, because it appears that the dialogue on the industry, on the petroleum industry, is always two-way, government and industry. The communities, who are a key stakeholder block, are hardly part of the dialogue. They're most of the time an afterthought. Ditto for the environment. But there are a lot of issues, and the time is not there to go into all that. So I just mentioned those. But the question that I would like to pose here is, if we're to have an honest conversation, and we have clarity, whether in terms of ideology and the various economic models that we're talking about, liberalization, free enterprise, moving to private sector-driven petroleum industry, should we have the Petroleum Equalization Fund that 5% provision, should it even be featuring at all when we're talking about a transition?
We'll take answers to those three first, and then we can take some more. The first one is on new refineries. On refineries, I'll take that. I think the question is, look, we see all we're doing in terms of refineries, especially the old ones, and the comments snipped in there is that there are no results on the ground. That's not true. The fact that we're not even spending government money, suppose, or refurbishing is a major, major milestone move. Because all over the years, over the last 20, 30 years, we've been doing refurbishments and terms with government monies, and refineries are still where they are. So the decision even to seek private sector money, put it on a profitable platform and not seek government support in this, for me, is a major move. A lot of work has been done. It won't be transparent until refineries are working at the levels that they should. But the typical rebuild of refineries that have been abandoned is between a year and 2 years. And so it's going to take that while. The damage has been long coming. It's going to take a while to get that accomplished. We're focused on this. We'll deliver on those results. You've talked about new refineries, and I've mentioned some. I've mentioned the Ajip refinery. I've mentioned the Dangote refinery. So there is a focus on trying to externalize these over and above the government-owned refineries. And what, unlike before where the private sector investment wasn't the business of anybody, we are now spending time with those who are actually willing to put in money in a very high-risk environment. And let me be, just so you understand what this involves. Because sometimes we're very emotive when we talk about this, but we don't understand the fundamentals of what is involved. We're in an environment where, for obvious understandable social reasons, we are not letting prices match the reality. So if you already have a downstream product pricing environment that is subsidized in the sense that you are selling below the price par at an international level, whoever is going to invest in your refinery is asking themselves, what's going to happen? I mean, if I finish this refinery I'm building, the product I'm going to sell, in the absence of an official policy on paying me back the difference between the price and the cost of the product, is I'm going to be taking a loss from day one. Why would I do it? So those are the kind of environments, and somebody mentioned very intelligently the cost of funding if you are going to harness your money from a local environment. So you're dealing with high cost of funds, you're dealing with an unsecured pricing environment, you're dealing with potential security issues in terms of militancy, depending on where the plant is located. And so the individual has got to make a business decision. So just getting people to invest in those, making anybody make an investment and proceed with it, is a major, takes a lot of effort. You asked the question whether a subsidy exists. I will say this. The price today of petroleum products landing in Nigeria on the average is over 140, I beg your pardon, about 170, 180 naira per liter. And the landed price because of the new prices of crude. The price at which we sell is regulated, I think, following my last increase at 145. So you can do the numbers, and that's the nature of subsidy. That's the nature of under recovery that you see in these products, and that's the reality. Now, how do we fund that? Ideally, we'll either go to the National Assembly and get some level of appropriation to cover that, or NMPC through its own internal commercial workings is able to provide those products and hopefully cover that from some of the product that it is producing on the upstream side. But the reality is that, like Tim rightly says, you need to try and create a separation between these two business lines and let everybody be profitable in their own mix. And if you did it, price of products will not be what they are today. But that's a conversation for another day. But are we under recovering? Clearly. The price is there in the internet, anybody can check it. You asked the question about diversification of the economy from petroleum. A lot of work has been done by this government on that. If there's any area where we at least can, under the President's mandate, we can register some level of really, really positive focus, it is that. And bear in mind, we're doing this diversification in an era when there isn't sufficient money. But agriculture has boomed. I mean, we are doing a whole lot better in agriculture than we are. In fact, we're in a position where we're today dealing with more an issue of influx of imported products that we can produce locally. And that's why you found the sort of quagmire we face ourselves when we begin to see a lot of rice coming from Niger. coming from, Benin Republic, to the point where the president needed to address whether or not we need to close our border at some point to stop that influx. But rice production, maize production, quite a lot of husbandry production has gone up. We could do a lot more. Farms are beginning to transit from the local traditional farms to mechanized farms quite a lot. I don't know, if you don't have a farm by now, then you must be doing something wrong, because I have one. We've preached it to a point where everybody, even if it's the last little garden in your house, needs to begin to think of how to produce something. So we're heading that. Transportation is moved quite substantially. A lot of the railways that were abandoned have been brought in place. Nobody understands how much employment is generated from transportation, but more important, it is the vehicle for moving goods and services. Lots of the railways are being reactivated thanks to the lots of facilities I've gotten from the Chinese government, but there's been a lot of focus on that. So services are improving tremendously. Services are growing. If there's nothing you can say for the young people of this country, it is the fact that literally every young person who comes out of school and stares unemployment in the face seeks to set up something. Whether it's in the fashion area, whether it's in the music area, whether it's in the agric area. Last week I got taken by a young lady who had been writing to me for about a year to come see her farm. And I was outside the Kubwa area, and I was absolutely fascinated by what work she's done in terms of poultry, mid-sized poultry, mid-sized animal rearing, and a cropping, to the point where she's now been able to produce her own fishery and be able to produce packaged dry fishes that she's now beginning to send out to Nigerian diasporas in London and the US. Over a period of 3-4 years, with very minimal capital, she's done a fascinating work. Her story is perplexed and very encouraging, but quite frankly, every nook and corner that you look today, young people are trying so hard to try and be their own entrepreneurs and set up something. And the only thing between them and that is cheap capital, and that's one of the areas where we are working. The NCDMB, for example, came up last year with a $200 million funding that they placed in Bank of Industry, with a mind to encourage people who are setting up some of these small type, focus on Nigeria, technology-based, oil sector-related type investments. We need a lot more of those funds. We need a lot of countries beginning to invest in us to do that. So a lot of diversification is taking place. And if after the meeting you meet me, I can give you a lot more specifics on those. Now let me move to the other question, which is on fiscal, and I'll ask Tim to deal with that. And I think your question was largely if you're going to continue to impose penalties in an environment that is not really conducive, increasing cost of production, militancy issues, a literal collection of a lot of parastatals. How do you do that and still want to impose penalties? So I'll answer.
What I didn't say about the fiscal policy is that there are also checks and balances in the fact that other than safety-related type of costs, we want to insist that regulators of people do not impose costs on operators. And in any case, the policy seeks to sunset quite a lot of the what you would call cost chasers, people who are looking at cost by this general fiscal rule. On cost of money, the fiscal system actually provides a leeway. Under the proposals, the hydrocarbon tax that you pay, of course, interest is not deductible, but under CETA, you deduct interest expense, a business expense, and that is done against the tax rate. So there is no change in the status of your ability to deduct a business expense, which is the cost of your capital, as provided under the Company Income Tax Act. In fact, that's the benefit of insisting that oil companies should pay CETA and not exclusively PPT, because generally it enables you to get all the benefits any company, for that matter, would have operating in Nigeria. I think the issue of cost and the level of the penalty itself is what we need to talk about. In the chart I have in some presentation, it's not here, we have taken historical costs, okay, during which oil prices have changed. We've taken that level and set the level at which those costs can still be maintained without your paying a penalty. In other words, we have recognized those historical costs. The only 2 years that costs have really gone out of whack was in 2016 and 2015 when we were looking at the data. And there was a need to see a dramatic improvement in that cost. So I think if you look at the level at which what we call the cost price ratio has been set, it accommodates all the historical costs except for 2 years. And the reason for that is clear. That was the militancy and some of those issues which are being managed. So 2 points. Cost of funds is taken care of under CETA. The benchmark that you need to set actually recognizes costs that have occurred in spite of the 2009 difficulties we had with militancy and so on and so forth. So the level has been set to, it's actually bad practice for me to actually be saying this as an economist, that you are basically recognizing the cost of militancy and things like that. But the level has been set actually to recognize those costs. And my final comment is that, of course, when production goes up, unit costs tend to go down. And the benchmark is really set on a unit cost basis. So if you have two choices, reduce your cost or grow your production. And some people may, and we're leaving that to the operators to manage their businesses accordingly.
Thank you. I think the only additive I have to that is the fact that one or two companies have been able to hit the sort of benchmark that we're setting locally. So it means that even under the same operating conditions, they are able to focus and achieve the same thing. Let me invite Wite to talk on the PEF 5% factor that somebody raised.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Quite simply, around the issue of the Petroleum Equalization Fund, the point is this. You cannot presume to levy 5% on all fuels if we're talking about getting to the point where we're going to end up in a deregulated environment for petroleum products. So to help the transition for products and vis-a-vis the need to have a gas sector getting off the ground, you've got to take a position. What works for you as a country, products or gas? I think the stats show very clearly that gas is cheaper, gas is cleaner. So why levy gas? So basically our position is that if you really want to push fast penetration of gas into the economy and into our transportation and industrial systems, it makes sense to put a levy perhaps on what they call white products. These are the expensive, heavy fuels. You basically, by doing that, you are positioning the gas, which are not levying, more competitively against those dirty and expensive fuels. And then what you then have, you have a natural transition in terms of demand towards gas use. Our view is this. We're at the point where there's a generational opportunity for that transition to massive gas usage in Nigeria to occur now. If we're enacting legislation, we should use legislation to stimulate this transition. But if you put a levy on gas, whilst also levying other products, you're actually not helping the case for gas. So it makes sense to step down that 5% on gas and leave the rest on the petroleum products. That's one point. Mr. Wills also mentioned the issue around the environment. And I think actually it's actually not correct that we're not doing anything with respect to the environment. If there's any government that's done anything relating to the environment, it is this government. We are, as we speak, about to launch a massive program which will lead to the winding down of gas flares in this country. So if we consider that we're using as much gas to produce power as we're flaring, then you might recognize the significance of this policy towards the commercialization of flare gas, which is basically to create a pathway for the private sector to be able to access gas that's otherwise being flared and wasted, right? Particularly in the Niger Delta. So we might actually get to a point within 2 to 5 years from now where up to 70 different projects spread around the Niger Delta are actually winding down all those massive gas volumes that are being flared and are now being used productively, right, into projects that actually create economic impact for the Niger Delta and for the wider economy, whilst also displacing major carbon emissions into the environment.
All right, again, the only thing to add to that is it is transitory. It is not a perpetual imposition that we see, and I think it's not a private sector generated and driven anyway, from what I see. So it's not a government geared type penalty. I think that does it for the questions. Our time is up. We'll take just 2 more questions, and then we will have to go. And let me look to the back and not give you the privilege of sitting in front. And so there's a hand up there at the middle. Yes. Someone at the back. No, not in the middle. And standing doesn't get you the voice. No. Sorry. We need people at the back. Yes, people at the back. All right. And then another gender sensitive, another lady somewhere. All right, I have one in front.
May I stand on the existing protocol? My name is Isaac Ohaka.
Okay, we'll come back to you.
No, my question is just based on what the Honorable Minister has said so far as regards to the sustainable transition. I want to ask a question in regards to the Niger Delta, the area where the product is being produced. I think that whether if there has been any synergy, that is the relationship between the host community, the youths, and the people, in order to create a good atmosphere of production where the both parties can work in a good voice so they can have a sustainable transition when it comes to the area of production. So has there been any way in which they match west by west with the community and the youths and the elders? Not issue of maybe having a policy whereby they embark on a policy and discuss with the community where the youths are also not involved in such decision, having one-on-one talk with them. Then I think if this is being done, it will bring a sustainable progress when it comes to the oil sector. That is my question. Thank you.
The lady in front on the left-hand side here. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Please don't mind my voice, but I will speak out. My name is Chisom Chude. Honorable Minister, my question is, I've come across this oil spillage investigation system. I want to ask, what is the justice being done through this system? Then secondly, I also want to...
Sorry, I didn't hear you, sorry.
Oil spillage investigation system. I've read about it, and I don't understand everything it says. So my question is, what is justice being done by this system with regards to oil spillage? Then my second question, it will be a contribution. I think in view of this transformation process. I think it's better in transforming our economy to steer away from total oil dependency. Yes, there are other ways we can be able to, depend. It mustn't be through total oil dependency. Thank you.
So you've been very resilient. Let me give you a last opportunity for a question, and then we can round that up. Thank you.
Thank you for recognizing me. The Honorable Minister of State, who was incidentally my lecturer in the law school, 1988. I congratulate you.
Thank you.
And the distinguished panelists. My question centers on security of supply of petroleum products. The summary of these reforms, or the conclusion of the matter, is to make petroleum products available to the people. I do not see in the new reform how domestic supply obligation is being built in. Is there any way you can explain this to us? Because it's one of the instrumentalities, one of the ways developed countries have been able to guarantee the supply of petroleum products to their citizens. I don't know whether we have anything or a place for domestic supply obligation to guarantee security of supply in a country that has abundant natural resource like petroleum. And then the next question, I'm sure, which my learned lecturer will not avoid, is why must we continue to import petroleum products in a country like this? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start from the last questions, and then I'll go up to the first. Why do we have to keep importing is obviously tied to domestic supply obligations. So they are related questions. The reality is sometimes we've got to step back and look at the challenges that faces a typical president. On one hand, the Nigerian is very emotive about the price of petroleum product. He wants to, if we have a chance, we'd like to get it for free. Because we believe that our country has oil, so we really shouldn't pay for it. And that influences the reaction that you see each time there is an increase in the price of petroleum products. But the reality is that in the countries that you are trying to emulate, when you talk of certainty in terms of supply, are founded on free market principles. So the prices are determined by the market principles. So a marketer determines that if the price has a margin to it, he supplies the product. He doesn't think he's going to make a profit, he quits it. And if you look at the history in the US, for example, over the last 10 years, you've seen most multinationals exiting the downstream sector and specializing a lot more in the upstream sector. They're selling all their assets in the world in terms of downstream. Because they've determined that building new refineries is not profitable enough for them. They've determined that they rather produce the crude and then pass it on to smaller companies to run the filling stations and the refining capabilities. Free market, free driven, free business. In Nigeria, it is not so, because even if the prices show you, like I mentioned before, a 180 to 145 relationship between imported price and the cost at which you sell, if you try to go against it, you hold the president responsible. So he's dealing with all kinds of balancing act. That's not to say that people do not realize what needs to be done. But you've got to look at the levels of development, the challenge in the economy, the recession that we just went through, and you've got to think in terms of the interest of the masses. So the reality is, how do you guarantee supplies? They're working hard to guarantee supplies in a very tough environment. And the only way we can then move fairly rapidly is to move on refining. If we get to a point where we are refining a whole lot more, hopefully the cost should be down. But let's not take it for granted that owning the refineries here or refining all our consumption 100% is synonymous with being able, quite frankly, to sell products at cheap levels. No, because the refiners expect to sell products at competitive rates. So we've got to look at all so when we are pushing crude production costs down and saying reduce the cost so that the bottom line is better, it's all part of that whole equation of reduce costs, get it cheaper, refine, and hopefully make it cheaper. But ultimately, unless you begin to listen to the market fundamentals, they're going to be there. So a country has two choices. You can decide that it is important by virtue of the consumption of this country to provide cheap petroleum products. And so you decide you will subsidize it. You provide money appropriately through appropriation, and be able to sequence that and provide it at whatever cost you want. Saudi Arabia did it for a very long time before it decided to hands off. A lot of the Arab countries do that. Or you decide that, look, this is pure market economics. The products will be provided. If you think you want to play in the card, go make your money, and so we'll leave the prices out of it. And that doesn't take away from the decision by the government in terms of its own commercial agency and MPs to say, okay, even though this is the situation, we're going to supply products at a certain point. You realize that when we increased price in 2016, although we had a range of I think 135 to 145, some companies provided products at 145. Some stayed and provided products, especially NMPC, at 136 for quite a while. That's the decision you can make on your own. But the point I'm making is that they're all interwoven. Now, if we increase our barrels above the 2 million, maybe to 2.5, maybe to 3 million, the country has a right to say we're going to set out 500,000 barrels to fuel the local refining at a subsidized level, and then that can then help subsidize prices down to the common man who's at the fuel points. It's all an option of a country. But the problem comes when you do not have those funding and you do not address the market dynamics, so the investment just ruptures and everybody pays the price for it. So it's a very hard balancing act, and believe me, it is taking all of our wits to try and keep this going. We talk of, I've heard so much talk about community. We are doing a lot on community, apart from what Wita says in terms of cleanups that we're beginning to do for the first time, a lot of money being put into private sector driven efforts. We are also looking at all kinds of schemes within the ministry. The gas commercialization program is ongoing. The LPG penetration is ongoing. There are all sorts that we're doing, to try and ensure that benefits come to those communities. And there's a massive amount of engagement. A good part of my job is really to engage these communities, engage these states, work out enforceable platforms that enable them to see the real benefits. I do know there's a lot of frustration for oil-producing communities. Sometimes you say, look, I see all these huge contracts in my corridor. I see the pipelines. I see all this. What are the commercial benefits to me? But I think the answer to that is to set up sustainable corporate institutions by citizens of these areas and to compete for some of the jobs. And also for government to be able to set out some levels of percentage of those works in the particular parameters for those states. And one of the things we're doing is MOUs within states, within the states and the oil companies operating in those areas to try and address some of those. Tough call, tough concerns, but again, you can't run away from it. Those engagements are key. Is anybody dealing with the oil spillage bit? I think if I understand what you're saying, you're saying the oil spillage investigation system. I'm not exactly sure. Is that the NOSDRA? No, it must be the NOSDRA thing that you're talking about. What NOSDRA does largely is that when there's a spill, they get into they can find out the causative factor for the spill, and then make recommendations to DPR and government in terms of who should take responsibility for those spills. And it's gone both ways. Sometimes obviously the oil companies haven't done historically as much as they should in trying to take responsibility, and we're going very hard on those now to make sure they take responsibility. But at other times too, the spills that are coming from community interventions, individuals who go to bust pipes, opposed to trying to steal crude. So the question is, when you have those sort of spills emanating from deliberate acts of subversion, what do you do? Does an oil company take responsibility for it? So first, our responsibility is to make sure that you ensure that you do not have spillage that creates a major community environmental hazard. You deal with those, get the cleanup done and fairly quickly and contain the situation. The second is on the basis of the signatures of those crude to find out really who is responsible for this spill and what penalties can be imposed. In my very many years in the private sector, I spent a lot of time on oil spill and compensation cases and a lot of settlements on those. But after a while, what you found out with the benefit of lawyers such as yourselves here is that you get into a community that the spill is addressed and lawyers begin to file multiple actions. You settle, they file more. And there are people who just run chambers on the basis of just trying to pile up community claims, and that is the sole concentration that they have without any respect for the data. It's almost an intellectual 419 type experience. So you face those sort of situations, you're not able to therefore address the ones that are serious and real. So my appeal on this is that we've got to get real, we've got to get serious, we've got to get national in terms of our outlook on these issues. When there are spills, by all means, let the responsibilities fall on the polluter. But at the same time, don't generate the spills for purposes of trying to levy a claim that ordinarily would not have existed. Otherwise, the oil industry will collapse and die. So on the basis of this, I think we can round up and thank you very much for listening. There are obviously lots of people who have questions. See us outside or see some of my colleagues and see how we can help you navigate some of those concerns that you have. Thank you very much.
Can we have a louder applause for the panel? Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone on the panel. I would like to now invite the chair of the TCCP and the president-elect to join the panelists on stage for a group photograph, and also to invite the lead coordinator for this panel, a member of the TCCP, Princess Frank Chukwani, to deliver the gifts. All right, wonderful. It's been a long day, but some entertainment coming up later on this evening. So just to announce the on-board concert, that will be later on this evening. I know it was originally scheduled somewhere around 6 to 9, but I don't know if there's any update on that, when it will actually start. Any information on the concert? Okay, I don't have any new information, but it is scheduled to hold between 6 and 9 p.m. So I imagine that you can just check in the hall. It's holding right here, and it promises to be a very exciting time. So we look forward to having you there, and of course, in the sessions tomorrow. Thank you, and have a good evening. I still have a couple of lost and found items that haven't